One of the great things about going to film school was meeting so many people who had similar interests as me. And one of these people ended up taking their knowledge of film and applying it to working at one of the major entertainment news sources out there. Now, this person does not want to be identified and stuff. They said I could, share what they had said in their stories and stuff, but I'm going to change their name to Alex in this situation, and I'm not going to identify exactly which source they ended up working for, but I will say that pretty much every single major entertainment news source out there is all owned by the same parent company. Like, Cinema Blend, I think, is an outlier, but otherwise, like, a lot of them are owned by Valnet, I think is the parent company. Anyway, so she ended up sharing a lot of stories with me about how they censor what the writers are allowed to put out there. Now, I don't necessarily know that it's a big shock to anyone that, writers are censored or that these companies only want certain things being put out there. That's not really breaking news or anything. But if you wanted some confirmation that that's happening, or you wanted to learn a little bit about how that's happening, or what words and phrases exactly are being censored, well, here you go. So one of the first stories Alex told me was about Mary Sue. Now, you've probably heard this term before, and just if you haven't, it's the term for the self-insert character that's seemingly perfect and just, has no flaws, everyone likes them, yada yada yada. And I know I've heard a lot of people saying that it's a very sexist term because it's named after a woman. I will say, from what limited research I have done, admittedly, from what I have heard, it's only called that because that was the name of the first character where this pattern was recognized, so it's just kind of, naming something after the person who discovered it or something like that. It's a similar thing to that. And you have Gary Stu and whatever. So it's something that happens, female characters, male characters, all characters are susceptible to this. But generally, it's not a very enjoyable character type because, well, they're boring. They don't really add much to a story, they're pretty unexciting. Sometimes you can get away with it in very specific circumstances, but for the most part, they're really not fun unless you're writing fanfiction, which is why that's where that started. And that's all fine for fanfiction. But generally, people don't like Mary Sue's in any other story. So Alex was tasked with writing an article that I think she said was something along the lines of, like, lead characters that ended up ruining the show or something like that, or ruining the movie, whatever. And so it wasn't all female characters, but there were quite a few. And so one of them was Captain Marvel. And one of the things was she ended up writing in there, people, both fans, don't seem to like Captain Marvel much, often citing the criticism that she is a Mary Sue, or a character that, presents as being flawless and has very little growth and stuff like that. That's not the exact quote here, I'm just trying to go based off of memory, but you get the idea. So basically saying, a lot of fans say this character is a Mary Sue, and that is often a reason cited for why they dislike the character and therefore ended up disliking the movie. That should be fun. It's pretty objective, and it's pretty darn true. In all honesty, if you look at, Captain Marvel reviews, it's not going to take you very long at all to find someone mentioning Mary Sue. And she ended up being pulled aside by the editor and had to have kind of an uncomfortable conversation, she said, about how they will not use the term Mary Sue on their site because it's basically a slur against women. Now, I understand if they're like, we want to be polite, all fine and good, that's good to be polite. And I can understand where, I guess before, I thought they were kind of always just trying to walk the line in between fans and studios and just trying to not really be too divisive, shall we say. That'll make sense later, it's foreshadowing. But anyway, I thought this made some sense in that regard. But then when they take it so far as to be like, Mary Sue is essentially a slur, and it's almost on the same level as like the N-word, that's a no-go for me. So she was told that she had to rewrite things to take out any mention of the term Mary Sue. And so she did. And so she just wrote things like, this character was largely disliked by fans. But wait, that's not okay either. My dog's tummy is rumbling a lot and I'm very concerned. So if you can hear that, that's what that was. Anyway, so she ends up rewriting this to say that the character is just simply largely disliked by fans. which makes enough sense. That's kind of what the whole article is supposed to be about. But no, for the female characters, she couldn't say they were largely disliked, because then the editor had to pull them aside again and ask Alex, well, do you know that, like, no one has ever dressed up as them for Halloween? And of course she was like, I can't say no one ever has, but I can say that the large majority of the fan base dislikes this character. And they're like, well, how do you know that actually the large majority of the fan base dislikes this character? And she was like, I just haven't been living under a rock. Like, you know, for Galadriel, Captain Marvel, Rey, for all of those characters, it's not really hard to get the idea that a lot of people who loved the franchise otherwise didn't like this character. And she was told, you can't say that the character is largely disliked. In that instance, she was only allowed to say, the character is divisive. And she was like, what the heck? Like, why can't I just say the character is largely disliked? That should be fine. But she said, whatever. She agreed. She's like, okay, I'm just here to do a job. They have their idea of how they want things to be written. Fine. I'm just gonna write that and get my paycheck. And so she did. She changed it. So if you ever see that articles out there seem to be dancing around a character being disliked, it's probably because they don't want to admit the character is disliked. And that is just crazy to me. Like, you don't have to agree, you don't have to dislike any of these characters yourself in order to just acknowledge that, like, yeah, the large majority don't like the character. And I guess you can say they're divisive, but at the end of the day, like, that's just kind of, really, that's just dancing around the problem. And that's really, honestly, making it sound more 50-50 or, you know, something like that with the character and how many people don't like them. And it really does downplay the whole situation. Like, especially for Rey, I think, like, yeah, I saw some people dressing up as her when the movies, like, first started coming out. And afterwards, like, I don't know that many people really care for her at all. Like, even the people who were fans, I don't know that they really care too much about the character anymore, because she's just not really that interesting. And I'm sure there are some people out there who like her, but I can't really think of anybody in particular, and that kind of makes me think that, you know, if every single person I can think of is either neutral or dislikes the character, and I can't think of anyone who likes the character, maybe it does lean towards the large majority don't like her. Now, of course, I don't know everybody ever, so I can't say that I know for sure, but I really don't have any evidence to think that it's simply she's divisive. And honestly, it kind of ended up giving the impression that it was giving fuel to the whole idea of it's the toxic fans and it's just a few little people here who dislike things, and that's not actually, you know, the majority of the criticism against the, you know, these movies and shows. It's just fake, or it's trolls, it's inflated by bots and stuff. And I really didn't like that. That rubbed me the wrong way for sure. So now we get into something that honestly is even worse, because it has to do with real people. So she said that she was writing an article. She was tasked with writing an article about a certain actor. I don't remember who at this point, plus I probably shouldn't say, because again, I want to avoid giving too many details away. But she said that she was tasked with writing an article about this actor who had gotten into some trouble a while back with some personal relations, shall we say. And she was writing this article about, you know, okay, what happened? What have they done currently? And could their career ever recover? Or is it sunk for good? That was basically the premise here. And so she wrote it out, but needed some more words, needed to up the word count. So she was like, okay, you know what would be good? To compare to some peers. That makes sense. Let's look at other actors who have had issues for similar things and see how they responded differently and what that could mean for this actor. Could they ever recover if they, say, followed this person's example? Or if they do what this person did, will that mean their career is sunk? You know, that kind of thing. So it made perfect sense to me. And so they ended up, you know, citing one actor who had, you know, not necessarily gone through like a legal system, but had acknowledged what they had done and had been working on trying to improve and all of that, and was able to bounce back. Now we need an example of someone who did not apologize, who did not own up to what they did, and see how did that affect things. So she decided that the best example, and honestly the closest example, was actually Amber Heard. Now, agree with things or not, like her or not, you can't change the facts that she was found liable for defamation. There was a lot of stuff brought to court, a lot of evidence, I should say evidence brought to court that was shared. It was public, and a lot of people had thoughts and feelings about it. And generally, the public opinion largely turned against her. And after she was found liable, after so much of the evidence came out, she never owned up to anything. Now, for a lot of people who followed the case and were interested in it, they know that Amber Heard did some interviews afterwards, and so did her legal team, where even for stuff that they had to acknowledge, yes, this technically did come out in court, that this happened, there was a refusal to own up to anything, or to admit that, okay, yeah, if this bad thing came out, then I'm genuinely going to own up to this and take responsibility for what I did. And because there was no taking responsibility for things, that rubbed people the wrong way. And a lot of people just felt like this person's no good, they don't really deserve the career, and, you know, her career really hasn't bounced back. So she put in the article, Amber Heard was found liable for defamation based on these things, and a lot of people just didn't like her anymore after they saw the evidence that was presented in court. That is just fact. And they said that that was not okay. So once again, she had to have a conversation with the editor where she just was like, yeah, I'll sit quietly and just agree and say okay to this stuff. Because again, she just wanted her paycheck, so she was like, fine, whatever, I'll change it. And yeah, so they ended up saying that, well, they started by saying, we can't include these certain things about Amber Heard because we could get sued. And so she was like, okay, I need to make it more objective. That's the critique here. And so she changed it. She tried to make it a little more objective and stuff, saying that Amber Heard was sued for defamation and there was no official apology for anything that came out in court afterwards. So that is an example of a celebrity who did not apologize for what happened and their career hasn't recovered. Again, very objective. This is technical things. We do not technically have an apology. She was technically found liable for defamation, and her career hasn't recovered. There is nothing to sue there. And then she was told once again, no, we can't do that. We have to remove anything about her. We can't talk about Amber Heard. And she was like, what the heck? But she said, okay, that's fine. I'll take it out. And so what did they do? They said, well, actually, I have an idea for someone else you could sub in place of Amber Heard. And she was like, okay, fine, great. I can just, instead of fully taking Amber Heard out and coming up with something else to add to fluff it up, I'll just replace it with whoever you're thinking. Who are you thinking? And the important thing to note is that at this time, there was a celebrity, a male celebrity, that had just, in the past couple of days at this point, been accused of similar personal issues, if you get the idea. They were not found guilty. There was no evidence provided. It was literally just someone threw out an accusation against them a couple days ago. So, you know, the weakest thing ever where maybe more could come out and eventually that could end up being a full case of, oh, this person has these issues, but it was just allegations that had just come out. And that was the person they wanted her to switch Amber Heard out for. They wanted her to write that this person was the celebrity who was in trouble and had their career ruined because they didn't apologize for something. A man who had just recently been accused of something. And that was it. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So she ended up fixing the whole article in her own way. She found someone else entirely to talk about, and they were like, yeah, okay, fine, that works too. But it was just insane that they would be alright with that, because saying, oh, this person did do this thing they were just accused of a few days ago, that is the way to get sued. And she was like, I can't write about that because, you know, again, that will get us sued. I have no evidence to say this is factually what happened, and plus it doesn't even work because, I'm trying to look at people who already kind of have had things happen for a while here. This just happened a few days ago. I can't say they haven't owned up to or apologized for things. It just happened. Like, this is a breaking story right now. And the funny thing is like, I don't really follow this particular celebrity, like, at all, but I haven't found anything coming up about how they have been proven to have done what they were accused of, if that makes sense. Like, I haven't been searching the information out, but at the same time, like, I knew this was going on because it was such a big story when it first broke, but then nothing. So I have not heard a single thing dragging this person down or saying that anything that they were accused of is true, and so I'm just like, I don't even know that ended up amounting to anything, or maybe it was proven, not true. I don't know. And so it's just kind of ridiculous that they were protecting Amber Heard when actively being ready to throw another actor under the bus when they hadn't gone through even the trial of public opinion, in all honesty, because it was so darn new at the time. And so she just felt that that was absolutely ridiculous, and she refused to do it. Now, of course, she didn't outright say to the person, hey, this is ridiculous, but that's what she was thinking. That's what she told me. Anyway, so that one, it was pretty bad, because it's like, at this point, we're not just talking about fictional characters. This is, these are real people. And at this point, if someone has evidence coming out in court rulings, saying that, they did do the things they were accused of, and then you're going to protect them over someone who, not even just you're protecting them over someone else, you are actively trying to throw people under the bus who have not been confirmed to do anything wrong, to have done anything wrong. I don't really think I have to express why that is not okay. So now we move on to another situation, where it turns out that they ended up actually being okay with some amount of bullying, if it meant that it was bullying in the right way, I guess you could say. I don't really think there's a right way to bully, but we're going with it here. So this one, they said, was happening in like an online chat thingy here, so like everything was written out. So I got to actually read some of the stuff here. And so there was one writer who was like, I am, working on this article about Harry Potter. It is, my passion project. It's pretty long. I've been working on it for a really long time. I'm really proud of it, and I'm ready to send it in for publishing, but I ended up having to say something positive about J.K. Rowling. So they decided to ask the group of other writers, is it okay to say something nice about her, or is that going to be anti-LGBTQ? Well, LGBTQ plus, I think. I don't know. Anyway, so it seems kind of ridiculous, and like, okay, you can say something positive about someone, because look, at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not you believe the things being said about her, whether or not you believe she deserves the hate, whether or not you anything with that, how you feel, whatever, that's a whole other story. But generally speaking, like, everyone has good elements and bad elements, maybe some less than others, but whatever. The idea is generally to say, like, someone, is good at world building or something like that in writing. Like, that doesn't necessarily set a particular group back or hurt them or do anything like that, because it's not directly related, really. And I imagine some people would argue against that. In fact, I know some people would argue against that, because that's actually part of the story here. So another writer came forward and was like, yes, it will absolutely 100% set back the LGBTQ plus community. You will harm so many people, and blah, 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 and you'll make people want to end themselves. And I'm like, hold on, what the heck? And it was just, honestly, you could almost be impressed with how much venom they wrote with. It was overkill. It was crazy how they attacked this person. And they didn't even just leave it at, I think you could offend a lot of people by saying something positive about this writer. They went in and were like, you will be doing harm to so many people. And when I say, like, the whole, like, you will make people want to end themselves over complimenting someone, I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. And I'm just reading that like, holy cow. But no, this person just went on, and started to say that, like, this writer here, they will be contributing to evil, and they will be making people want to not live, and they will be setting back civil rights movements, and all of this stuff to just compliment J.K. Rowling in an article about Harry Potter. And I was like, this is overkill. This is so extreme. But I guess, like, everyone just, like, seemed to be very afraid to speak up and say, like, hey, you're going too far with this. And so they all just let it happen. And then the editors and managers and stuff were just like, well, you asked for an opinion and you got it, so yeah. And the writer ended up, like, the way they wrote, they sounded like a depressed puppy, if I'm being honest. And they ended up just scrapping the whole thing. They were literally so ashamed and scared of how this person lashed out at them that this passion project that they had been working on for so long, they ended up just completely scrapping the whole thing. So they're like, I'm so worried about the impact I'm going to have and how badly I'm going to affect people. And that was just such a shame. I really, 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 really wish that they had kept that other person in check. Because it is absolutely okay to say, hey, I don't know that this is necessarily going to be the best thing to put out there, or to say, hey, this goes against the public image that we collectively as a company are trying to cultivate, or something like that. Like my friend was like, okay, for my other things, I just, when they said, hey, we need to change this for this or whatever, she just said, okay, and changed it. Like, sometimes, again, she would change things a little bit differently, like thinking, okay, they want it to be more technical or whatever, and that would be fine, or just not use certain keywords. And it turned out to not be the case, but she just ended up saying okay and changing things, because she was just like, whatever, it's not that big of a deal, I'm just, like, I'm here to collect a paycheck. And again, they're just like, this is the public image we want to cultivate. She didn't necessarily agree with it, but it was like, whatever, And so for this instance, it made her really quite uncomfortable, and I think that, it should have, because honestly, it made me really uncomfortable, because the only thing I could really describe, if I had to, like, boil this down into one word and describe what happened, it would be bullying, and that's just it. And yeah, so them being willing to allow bullying because it was bullying for the greater good, I guess, I don't know, it reminds me a little bit of Hot Fuzz. So yeah, that one honestly was a pretty bad story to come out of there, because at that point it's like, that's seeping into how you treat people behind the scenes. And that's really not okay, to be wishy-washy with that, or to allow anything bad in that regard. Like, that's not okay. And that's a fine line to draw, that isn't okay, but nobody did. No, I really don't want anyone to take this as, oh, we need to be anti-woke, we need to be anti-women, we need to be anti-LGBTQ+, whatever. Don't do any of that, okay? Like, in all honesty, it doesn't make sense. It's not helpful. Don't do that. Please don't do that. But what I will say is that, for these sites that, are trying to cultivate a specific image, be aware that they're probably censoring things behind the scenes. Again, I don't think I'm the first person to present the idea that this could be happening, so this isn't groundbreaking by any means. So I guess really the lesson is just be mindful of who you're supporting. Whether it's a business or an individual person, a YouTuber, whoever, consider who really seems to have a balanced opinion, because that might be the person you're really going to want to support here. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much if you got to the end of this video. Please consider liking, subscribing, leave a comment on your thoughts and all of that. If you have any stories like this, please feel free to add it in the comments, because honestly, I'd be very interested to hear that. And thank you so much.